They blocked my driveway without warning, poured concrete like they owned the place, and then, like it was the most normal thing in the world, told me to be patient about it, so I flooded their entire neighborhood. Not with a hose, not with vandalism, not with anything illegal, nope. I did it with paperwork, permits, and one perfectly timed Carolina rain that didn't care about anyone's community values. I live in a quiet cul-de-sac outside Raleigh, North Carolina, one of those picture-perfect suburban pockets where the lawns are cut like military haircuts and the mailboxes all match because the HOA says they should. I moved back in about 6 years ago, right after my dad passed. The house had been my parents' place. My father built a lot of it with his own hands and a brain that never really switched off. He was a civil engineer, old school, slide rule kind of guy who could look at a slope in the road and tell you where the water would end up before the first drop hit the ground. He used to say something that sounded like a joke until life proved it was a warning. I trust soil surveys more than people. I didn't fully get it back then. I do now. Our HOA was run by a small pack of retirees with too much time, just enough authority to feel important, and a talent for turning neighborhood harmony into a power trip. The president was a woman named Carol Whitmore, always polite to your face, always smiling like she was hosting a garden party, but somehow you'd still feel her eyes on your trash can from 3 houses away. But the real engine in that little machine, that was the vice president, Evan Mercer. Early 50s, former real estate developer. Smooth handshake, expensive boat parked in his driveway like a trophy, and the kind of smile that made you want to check your wallet afterward. Evan loved to talk about community value, the way pastors talk about salvation, like if you didn't worship it properly, you were going to burn. I'd had small run-ins with them before, nothing dramatic. A letter about my grass being a half-inch too tall during a week I was traveling. A warning about leaving my trash bin out 12 hours too long. Petty stuff. Annoying but manageable. I kept my head down, paid my dues, waved at people, lived quietly. I wasn't trying to start a war. I just wanted to stay in the house my dad built and keep my life simple. The morning everything changed started with something boring. Exactly the kind of thing you'd never expect to flip your whole week upside down. I'd just come back from a follow-up appointment with my cardiologist. Nothing dramatic, routine stuff, but still not the kind of morning you want to end with a surprise. I turned onto my street and immediately saw orange cones. Then I saw gravel. A ridiculous amount of gravel. Right in front of my driveway. There were 2 trucks, a cement mixer, and 3 guys in reflective vests smoothing out wet concrete along the edge of the road. I slowed down thinking, okay, maybe they'll leave me a gap. Maybe it's temporary. Maybe this is the part where someone waves me in and says, "Sorry, sir, we'll make it work." Nope. They had completely sealed off the entrance to my driveway with a ridge of gravel and fresh forms. The concrete was already being poured for a new extended sidewalk, curving around the cul-de-sac like a neat little arc, except it ran directly across the mouth of my property, like they'd decided my driveway was optional. I parked on the street and just sat there for a second, engine running, staring. It's a weird feeling when someone alters your property without asking. It's not just inconvenience, it's invasion. Like someone walked into your kitchen, rearranged your cabinets, and told you to relax because it looks better this way. I stepped out and walked over to the nearest worker, a guy in his 30s, tired eyes, the kind of face that says he's been yelled at by richer people than me all week. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I need to get into my driveway." He glanced at the concrete, then at me. "We're pouring today, man. Can't move the forms now." "Who approved this?" He shrugged. "HOA project. Sidewalk beautification. We just do what we're paid to do." Beautification. That word stuck in my throat like a fishbone. I walked to my mailbox, because that's where they always hide their little surprises, and sure enough, there was a bright white sheet taped to the side like a parking ticket. Neighborhood Improvement Initiative. Temporary access limitations may apply. Estimated completion, 2 to 3 weeks. Thank you for your cooperation. 2 to 3 weeks. I called Evan. He answered on the second ring, voice cheerful like he'd just closed a deal. "Hey there, Caleb," he said, using my first name like we were buddies. "You guys blocked my driveway," I said. "I can't get my car in." "It's temporary," he replied, smooth, easy. "We sent out notices. You taped a paper to my mailbox this morning." "Well," he said, like I'd just misunderstood a minor detail, "it's a community upgrade. Adds value. Improves walkability. It's a small inconvenience for a long-term benefit." A small inconvenience. I can't access my own property. There was a pause, and then, this is the part that made something in me go cold. He gave a light chuckle. Come on, Caleb. Just park on the street for a few weeks. We're all making sacrifices. Sacrifices. Funny how people love sacrifice when they're not the ones bleeding. I wasn't consulted, I said. This is my driveway. It's within the right-of-way buffer, he replied. We checked. Completely compliant. That confidence in his voice wasn't ignorance, it was entitlement. He believed it, or he wanted me to believe it. Relax, he added. You'll thank us when your home value jumps. And then he hung up before I could answer, like he'd just ended a customer service call. I stood there looking at wet concrete creeping across the entrance my father poured 20 years ago with his own hands. I could literally picture him standing in that same spot, hands on his hips, explaining how water flowed downhill, how every cul-de-sac needed a clear drainage path, how one bad decision upstream could drown everyone downstream. That night, I walked the construction line slowly. The new sidewalk curved around the circle, neat and pretty, but at the lowest point of the street, right where runoff gathered during heavy storms, there was a storm drain, just a metal grid most people never noticed. I noticed it because my dad had shown it to me when I was a kid. That drain, he'd said, tapping it with his boot, empties through a culvert under our backyard. That's why this easement matters. And here's what made my stomach drop. The new forms for the sidewalk ran right over the outer lip of that drain inlet. They weren't removing it, but they were narrowing the intake, raising the edge, subtly altering the grade. To most people, it looked fine. To an engineer's son, it looked like a slow-motion disaster. I went into the garage and dug through an old filing cabinet, one of those metal ones that squeaks like it's trying to complain. My dad kept survey maps in there, yellowed pages, precise lines, elevation notes. I spread them across my dining table and traced the drainage easement with my finger. 50 feet clearance required for structural modification near the main storm line. County approval mandatory. HOA sign-off only after engineering review. So I checked the HOA website. No drainage study. No permits posted. No county record. And my chest tightened, partly because I've got heart issues and stress does what stress does, but mostly because I realized something ugly and simple. They hadn't done their homework. They built right across the one artery that kept this whole little kingdom dry. Now, I'm not a revenge guy by nature. I'm not the type who screams at meetings or keys cars or leaves flaming bags on porches. I like quiet. I like being left alone. But I also believe in boundaries. And they had crossed mine like it was a suggestion. So the next morning, I didn't call Evan. I didn't call Carol. I didn't argue with men holding shovels. I called the Wake County Engineering Department. There is something strangely calming about speaking to a government receptionist when you're angry. They don't match your energy. They don't get dramatic. They ask for parcel numbers and cross streets and case references. It forces you to slow down and speak clearly, like you're testifying in court. I told the woman on the line there was active construction within 50 feet of a primary storm drainage inlet, and I couldn't find any record of a county-issued permit tied to our subdivision easement. She paused. Sir, can you hold? 10 minutes later, I was speaking to an inspector named Martin Reyes, mid-40s, measured voice. Sounded like a man who'd seen every flavor of neighborhood stupidity. You're saying they altered grade near the main intake? He asked. Yes, sir. HOA initiated. Keyboard clicking on his end. A pause. I'm not seeing an approved drainage modification permit for that subdivision. That was the first moment I felt something shift, like the weight of the HOA's confidence suddenly didn't matter as much as the weight of actual law. Can you come out? I asked. I'll be there this afternoon. He showed up around 2 in a white county truck, clipboard in hand, boots already muddy from wherever he'd been before my little suburban soap opera. He walked the line, crouched by the storm drain, ran his hand along the fresh concrete edge. He didn't say much at first, then he stood up and looked at the slope like he was reading a sentence written in dirt. Who designed this? He asked one of the workers. HOA contracted it, the foreman said. Martin nodded slowly. You can't restrict inlet capacity without hydraulic review, he said, almost to himself. And you definitely can't alter grade within the easement without county approval. He pulled out a yellow pad and started writing. Then he taped a bright orange notice to one of the cones like it was a scarlet letter. Stop work order. Immediate effect. The workers backed away like someone had cut the music at a party. The cement truck shut down. The air got quiet in this heavy, awkward way, like everybody suddenly remembered the rules exist for a reason. Evan's SUV pulled up about 20 minutes later. He got out fast, phone already in hand, jaw tight. "What's going on?" he demanded, looking at Martin. "County code enforcement," Martin replied evenly. "You're building within a regulated drainage easement without proper permitting." Evan forced a smile. "We checked everything." "Not with us," Martin said. And I saw it, the flicker in Evan's eyes. Not fear, exactly calculation. Like he was mentally flipping through options. Who can I call? Who can I threaten? Who can I charm? "This is just a sidewalk extension," he said. "Community improvement." "You've reduced inlet flow," Martin replied. "You need an engineered drainage study before proceeding." Evan glanced at me. No smile this time. Just that look people give when they realize you're not as harmless as they assumed. Martin handed him paperwork and left. The workers packed up. And for a second I thought, okay, maybe this is done. They got caught. They'll fix it. My driveway will be cleared, apology or not. But here's what nobody tells you about men like Evan. They don't learn from being corrected. They regroup. That evening Carol called me, voice syrupy sweet, like she was reading from a customer service script. "Caleb," she said, "we understand there's been a minor permitting issue." "Minor," I repeated, staring at the blocked driveway like it was mocking me. "These things happen," she said. "We're working to resolve it quickly. My driveway is still blocked." "It's temporary," she replied. "We'll expedite." I could hear murmuring in the background. They were on speaker. Board meeting vibe. Like I was a nuisance they were managing, not a homeowner they'd wronged. "Are you going to remove the forms?" I asked. "We need to coordinate," she said carefully. And that's when something clicked hard in my head. They still didn't believe they'd done anything wrong. They believed this was a hiccup, a delay, a paperwork problem, not a structural mistake, not an overreach, not an invasion. So that night, I stood in my backyard and looked at the culvert outlet where the neighborhood's runoff emptied during storms, a wide concrete mouth set into the slope behind my fence. When heavy rain hit, water rushed through that thing with force. My dad reinforced it years ago, lining the channel with stone to protect the foundation. Water doesn't argue. Water doesn't negotiate. It follows the path available. And right now, that path had been narrowed upstream by an unpermitted mess. Here's the twist people don't expect when they hear, "I flooded the neighborhood." I didn't sabotage anything. I didn't block drains in the dark. I didn't do anything sneaky. I did the most boring, devastating thing you can do in a fight with bureaucrats. I followed the rules better than they did. The next morning I called a licensed excavation contractor, Tom Granger. He'd known my dad. He'd worked on my retaining wall before. He wasn't some fly-by-night guy. "Tom," I said, "I need to modify the drainage intake on my property." There was a long silence. "You planning to block it?" he asked carefully. "I'm planning to adjust the inlet structure on my side of the easement," I said, "with full county approval to protect my foundation from altered upstream conditions." Another pause, and then I heard it in his voice, respect. Maybe even a little worry. "You got permits?" "Working on it." I filed for a property improvement permit that same day. Martin reviewed the request personally. I was explicit. I intended to construct a temporary reinforced barrier on my land to prevent backflow and protect my foundation from upstream grade changes caused by adjacent unauthorized construction. I wasn't hiding anything. I wasn't playing cute. I was writing it down like a man who expects his words to be read in court someday. Martin approved it within 48 hours. That's the part that makes people angry when they hear this story, because it sounds like loophole magic. But it wasn't magic. It was compliance. It was me using the system the way it's supposed to be used instead of assuming I had the right to do whatever I wanted because I had an HOA title and a boat. By Friday afternoon, Tom's crew was in my backyard pouring a solid reinforced concrete barrier across part of the culvert mouth, not sealing it permanently, but narrowing it significantly and installing a raised lip with a debris screen. It limited inflow capacity to what the original engineered grade supported. In other words, I reset the system to what it was designed to handle. Evan showed up halfway through, shouting from behind my fence like a man used to getting his way with volume. "What the hell are you doing?" I walked over calmly, hands at my sides. "Protecting my property." "You're blocking the neighborhood drain." "No," I said evenly. "I'm adjusting intake capacity because you altered upstream grade without engineering. County approved." He stared at me like I'd slapped him with a dictionary. "You can't do that." I can, I replied. And I did. He pulled out his phone, probably to call someone important, and found out quickly there was no one above the permit. Not in the way he needed. The barrier cured over the weekend. And then on Monday night, the forecast changed. Heavy rain. 2 inches expected. I slept better than I had in weeks. The rain started around midnight, steady at first, then harder. I woke up around 3 to the sound of it hammering the gutters, that deep constant roar that makes your house feel like a drum. By morning, the cul-de-sac looked like a reflecting pool. Water always gathered at the lowest point, but this time it wasn't draining fast enough. The narrowed upstream inlet, thanks to their half-finished sidewalk grade, combined with my intake set to original tolerance, created a bottleneck. By 8 a.m., the street held several inches. By 10, it was creeping into driveways. I stood on my front porch with a mug of coffee, watching neighbors in rubber boots pushing water with brooms like they could physically convince it to leave. Evan's house sat at the lowest curve of the circle. By noon, his luxury SUV was axle deep. He came splashing down the street toward my house, rain jacket soaked, hair plastered to his forehead, eyes wild. "You need to remove that barrier," he said, breathing hard. "Now." I took a slow sip of coffee. "My driveway is still blocked." "This is different," he snapped. "This is flooding." "It's drainage," I corrected, calm as a man reading a weather report. "The system can't handle modified grade." "You're causing this." "No," I said quietly. "Unpermitted construction caused this." Water sloshed around his shoes. He looked past me at the street turning into a shallow lake, and something in him cracked. Not guilt, not humility, panic. "You're going to ruin people," he said. I looked at the rising water, then back at him. "Then maybe you shouldn't have ruined my access." He stared at me like he'd never really seen me before, not as the quiet guy who pays his dues and stays out of the way, but as someone who understood leverage. By the end of day 1, the cul-de-sac didn't look like a street anymore. It looked like a shallow lake with mailboxes sticking out like little sad islands. The rain kept coming in steady waves, nothing biblical, nothing hurricane level, just one of those stubborn Carolina systems that parks itself over you and refuses to move. And here's the weirdest part: one didn't feel joy. I felt justified and uneasy. Because when you flip a table, even if you're right, you still have to stand in the mess you made. That evening around 7, there was a knock at my door, not pounding, not polite either. "Urgent." I opened it to find Evan, Carol, and 2 other board members standing behind him in damp jackets. Evan looked tired, smaller somehow, like the water had washed the arrogance right off his face. "Caleb," Carol began, "no syrup this time. We need to talk." I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me, because I didn't want them in my house, not after they treated my driveway like public property. "The neighborhood is experiencing severe flooding," she said carefully, like she was reading from a script. "I've noticed," I replied. Evan skipped the script. "Remove the barrier." "It's permitted," I said. "You're weaponizing infrastructure," he shot back. I almost laughed, because the audacity of saying that to the guy who followed county protocol while you poured concrete like a toddler with a sandbox. "No," I said. "I'm protecting my foundation from your unapproved upstream alterations." Carol pinched the bridge of her nose, eyes closed for a second like she was trying not to scream. "What will it take?" she asked quietly. And that question hung in the humid air between us. Not "are we wrong?" Not "how do we fix this responsibly?" Just "what will it take?" "My driveway cleared immediately," I said. "Forms removed, gravel gone, access restored." Evan nodded fast. "Fine. Done." "And full restoration costs," I continued. 15,000. All 4 of them froze like I'd fired a gun. "That's extortion," one board member muttered. "It's restitution," I corrected. "For blocking my property. For the stress. For rearranging medical appointments. For treating my land like it belonged to you." Evan stepped forward, eyes sharp. "You're enjoying this?" I met his stare. "No. I'm finishing it." Thunder rolled again, like the sky itself was waiting to see what they'd do. "We can't cut you a check without a meeting," Carol said. "Then call one," I replied. "Because that water isn't receding tonight." They left without another word. The rain stopped sometime after midnight, but without proper inlet capacity, the water lingered, draining slowly inch by inch. Day 2, insurance adjusters started showing up, clipboards, cameras, wet pant legs, that whole depressing parade. Neighbors who'd once just nodded politely at me now looked over with something else in their eyes: suspicion, blame, maybe even respect. Hard to tell. Suburbia has a funny way of smiling while it judges you. Evan didn't knock that day. He sent an email instead. Emergency HOA meeting. 6 p.m. at the public library. Clubhouse unavailable due to water damage. That detail alone almost made me laugh. Karma has a sense of humor when it's in the mood. I showed up not because I had to, but because I wanted to look them in the eye. The meeting room smelled like old books and damp fabric. About 30 residents crammed into folding chairs, murmuring like a hive. The board sat at a plastic table up front, papers scattered, faces tight. Carol cleared her throat. As you all know, we are dealing with unexpected drainage complications related to the sidewalk project. Unexpected? Sure. Evan stood up. We've identified contributing factors, including modifications to downstream intake structures. There it was, his attempt to aim the spotlight at me without admitting the stage was built wrong. I raised my hand. You mean the permitted barrier installed after you built over a regulated easement without county approval? I asked evenly. A ripple moved through the room. People sat up straighter. Evan's jaw flexed. The county has been involved, he said carefully. Yes, I replied. Because I called them. Silence. I stood up. I didn't shout. I didn't rant. I just laid it out, clean, chronological, undeniable. You blocked my driveway without notice. You altered grade near the main storm drain without engineering review. You told me to be patient. Now garages are flooded, and suddenly we're having meetings. An older man in the back spoke up. Is that true? Carol hesitated, then said the closest thing to an admission we were going to get. The permitting process was incomplete. I looked around the room. I'll remove the barrier when my access is restored and I'm compensated for damages. Whispers ran through the chairs. Some angry, some supportive. Then, unexpectedly, Mrs. Donnelly, the sweet older woman who always waved at everyone, raised her hand. They shouldn't have blocked your driveway, she said softly. And that single sentence, simple, human, fair, shifted the room. Because once one person says the truth out loud, it gets harder to pretend it isn't true. By the end of the meeting, the board voted. Emergency funds authorized, immediate removal of construction materials from my property line, payment issued upon signed agreement. The check showed up in my mailbox the next afternoon. $15,000. No apology attached. Just a signature. Tom's crew returned the following morning. They removed the reinforced lip and reopened full intake capacity. Within hours, the water that had been lingering in the street finally drained completely. The cul-de-sac went back to looking like nothing happened except everything had happened. Evan doesn't wave at me anymore. Carol avoids eye contact at the mailbox cluster. The sidewalk project was quietly redesigned months later, this time with actual engineering review and county oversight. And my driveway? Clear. Untouched. Respected. Sometimes when it rains now, I stand at my front window and watch the water flow exactly the way my dad said it would, down the grade, into the drain, through the culvert, controlled and balanced. And I think about that thing he used to say about trusting soil surveys more than people. Because here's the truth I learned the hard way. Power isn't always loud. It isn't always a gavel at a meeting or a title on a board. A lot of the time, power is just knowing how things actually work and being willing to use the rules the way they were meant to be used, while someone else is trying to use them like a costume. And I'll be honest, sometimes I still ask myself if I went too far. Maybe some neighbors think I should have negotiated from the start, smiled more, swallowed it, taken the small inconvenience. Maybe they're right. But here's what I know for sure. When someone blocks your access to your own home and laughs about it, they're not looking for compromise. They're testing how much you'll tolerate. I didn't flood the neighborhood out of spite. I let physics and paperwork do what they were designed to do, and I reminded a board full of self-appointed gatekeepers that easements, like boundaries, exist for a reason. Now I want to know what you think, because this is where people split down the middle. Was I protecting my rights, or did I become the villain of the cul-de-sac? If you were in my position, would you have handled it differently, or do you believe sometimes the only language power understands is consequence? Drop your take in the comments. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA that forgot who actually owns the property, share your story too, because I swear, those small inconveniences always start small right up until they're pouring concrete across your life.